I'm Billy Hollowell, and welcome to Newsmakers, a show where we bring you interviews with pastors, actors, entertainers, and other notable news figures. On today's show, we're going to be getting into some fascinating topics, but before we do, if you are not subscribing to Newsmakers, make sure you head on over to wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe right now. Give us a rating. We love 5-star reviews. This is a show where you're going to dive deep into important issues with amazing people. With no further ado, here is today's show. On today's Newsmakers, we're talking with Lola Sheen, the daughter of Denise Richards and also Charlie Sheen, an incredible story of her finding faith and hope in Jesus. Here is Lola Sheen sharing all the details of her powerful conversion. Well, I'm so excited to chat with you. So much to talk about. You recently shared photos of your baptism, and not just photos, but really your testimony.
Yes.
What has it been like to get the reaction that you've gotten to that?
It's been so encouraging and so overwhelming, but in the best way possible. I never thought that that would happen so quickly, and it just shows that God really can do anything so unexpectedly. It's really just been so encouraging and so supportive because I felt so alone in the beginning of my walk, and now I get to share what Jesus has done in my life, and I've had so much support from everybody. It's just so sweet. And
Yeah, it's amazing.
yeah,
Wow.
I'm just so grateful.
Well, you talked a lot in your post about, hitting rock bottom and struggling. And I think so many people relate to that, not just in your generation, but I think every generation, people right now in this culture where we are who feel
Yeah.
lost and confused. What was it for you? Talk a little bit about before finding Christ, what was going on in your life?
Yeah, I grew up with parents who were in the industry. And I always felt super alone. My whole life, I just always felt like I could never find security and never find just something that felt like a home. And when I turned 16, that's when I really struggled with my mental health. And I had a very, very long season of dealing with depression. And I came out of that. I did not find Jesus at that time. And then when I turned 18 is when I really, really started to struggle with depression. And I feel like for me, it was just like, because when I was 16, I started therapy. And I was in therapy for almost 3 years. And so when I was 18, I was like, okay, like nothing's worked. Like I've been in therapy. I feel like I just don't have anybody. And that's when I was like, I just don't know what to do with my life. I also really struggled with feeling so insecure and very unworthy. And then it was almost just like, I remember because my family, I grew up Catholic, but I always knew of Jesus. I never knew him. And that is what changed so much for me when I met Jesus. It was like, now I actually know you. And I feel like there's a difference of going to church because you have to, and then going to church because you know Jesus now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
definitely.
And so, yeah, Jesus really, really did find me. And that's what changed me is like he chose me first. And it was the first time someone chose me when I wasn't like the best version of myself. You know what I mean?
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I have to ask you too, because you grew up in a very famous family with two very famous parents, right? And a lot comes with that, a lot of attention, a lot of pressure. Was that difficult for you? It sounds like there may have been elements that were tough, just being in the spotlight, even though, when you're the kid of a celebrity, you don't choose it, but it just comes with it.
Yeah, it does. It's so, I love that you said that because you don't choose it. It's just like, it was just my normal. And it was very difficult for me. My sister, I have an older sister, Sammy, and she has always loved like that whole thing, like the fame and everything. It was always very easy for her. For me, I almost had like imposter syndrome. Like I never felt like it was my thing, sort of.
Sure.
And I always wanted to feel normal. That was a big thing. I would always go to my friends' houses and be like, oh, like their parents aren't famous, you know what I mean? And so it took a very big toll on me, especially with feeling very looked at too. Because,
Yeah.
I would go to school when I was younger, and when a lot of things were going on with my family in the news, it was like my mom did protect me, but that didn't stop me from finding out things from my friends or whatever. And so they would come to me and be like, oh my gosh, I just heard this about your family, but I didn't know yet. And
Oh, that's gotta be so difficult. Oh
yeah,
my goodness.
yeah.
Oh, wow.
But
Wow.
yeah, I always just felt super anxious all the time, I remember, because I was like, I feel like no one gets me because none of my friends were in the same position. And so, yeah, the Lord has really, really helped me with finding security in all of this because it's so out of my control. And it can be so fake sometimes. I feel like that was a big thing for me. Is a lot of people can be like, "Oh my gosh, like I wish I had your life. You must be so happy all the time because, you have all these opportunities." And that doesn't mean I'm not grateful. I'm so grateful for the opportunities that I have. But there's a whole other side that's so dark. And a lot of people I feel like don't know that who haven't experienced, being in the industry.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and you've grown up. I mean, your whole life has been, it's so true though. People don't know. They don't know what
yeah.
that's like. They don't know the challenge. Even hearing you talk about, and I love that you're being so open about the mental health struggles you were
Oh,
going through, the things you faced, the darkness that you faced. When you talked about Jesus meeting you, talk about that because I love that. I mean, and
thanks.
he does. He meets us where we are. What was that moment for you where you realized, or was it more of a journey? Talk a little bit about. I know there was a moment where it really snapped. So I guess talk about that. But if
Of
there's a
course.
journey, feel free to share it.
Thank you so much. I actually went to a Catholic middle school. And I would go to church, and like I remember I said it was very like I just went because I had to at school. And it was never actually like I wanted to go because, I wanted to get closer to Jesus. And so I basically I never ever followed God. Like when I was like 16 and in my like after I graduated that middle school, in high school, the thought of Jesus just never came to my mind. It wasn't something I was against. I just never thought of it. You know what I mean?
It just wasn't there in front of you. It wasn't
Exactly.
something you were thinking of.
Right.
Yeah.
It wasn't
As a
something I was
compass,
thinking
right?
of.
Yeah.
Yeah. And none of my friends also that I was around were following Jesus. And so it's so crazy because when I was 18, that's when I say like everything changed because for some reason, right when I turned 18, everything just went downhill. I don't know like what happened, but yeah, I was really really struggling, and also depression is something that it almost felt like I was battling my own mind, and I felt like I just was in these chains of depression and anxiety. And I just was always trying to hang on to a little bit of faith somehow. And I would look for security in my friends, like when I was going through this hard time, or I would go to the beach and I would get a second of like temporary relief. But then I would come home and I'm like, what do I do now? And so it was,
It starts all over
yeah,
again, right? Because
all
it was
over
like a
again.
temporary distraction almost, right?
Yes.
From what you were feeling. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
true. And that's something that was so hard for me because I was like, I don't have any foundation. I don't have eternal like hope. It was just very like temporary. And so this one night I was in my bed and I remember having very just hopeless thoughts about my life. I was like, okay, why am I here if I'm just struggling so bad? And at the time, like, I always saw my friends and I was like, how are they so happy? Obviously, I don't know what goes on behind closed doors, but they all seemed like they were in such a good place. And the thing about this period of my life is no one knew I was struggling. And I didn't tell anybody, I think because I just felt so hopeless. I was like, I feel like anything anyone says right now is just not going to help me. And sometimes I would tell people about it, but I would feel so unheard. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so I just kept quiet. And this one night, I remember I was struggling really bad with nightmares as well. And so it got to a point where I wasn't sleeping. It was just like I was just so anxious. And I was laying down and I remember having such just terrible thoughts. I was like, I honestly just don't want, it's so sad, but I was like, I just don't want to be here anymore. I didn't want to, I just really did not see the point of me.
You were just hopeless. You were ultimately at, like, when you say rock bottom, there's no hope in that
Yeah.
moment. I
Yeah.
understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you. And I I wrote this down and I always say this, but I really don't know how else to put it except the fact that Jesus came in my room. It was like I had never experienced anything like it. His presence came to me, and I think it was around like 12. And I felt this overwhelming sense of peace in my room. And I remember I saw a clip, this Christian influencer, her name is Ali Yost, and I always say, is the reason why I think I got saved, because I saw a video of her the day before. It came up on my TikTok and it was her talking about Jesus. So the thought of Jesus kind of was in my mind the day before. And
Wow.
then I think that's what opened the door to let him in, because I always say he's a gentleman. He's not going to barge into your life, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so I think once I started to think about him, the next night, that's when he came to me. And it really felt like he took my hand and just said, I am here to rescue you and try this again now with me. And
Wow.
so, yeah. And I remember I went to bed that night feeling Jesus so close to me. And I just like to explain this to someone who's not Christian. Whenever I tell my story to some people who aren't believers, it sounds crazy. But there's nothing like the presence of God. I always say this. There's just nothing like it. And
Yeah.
yeah, and so the next morning, it's so funny because I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, okay, where do I start, Jesus? How do I start following you? I don't even know
How do I
anything.
pray?
Yeah.
How do yeah.
How do I pray? So I looked up. How do I give my life to Jesus? And I said this prayer, Lord, I don't know what I'm doing, but I know that I just met you. And I want to give my entire life to you. And I did. And slowly but surely, Jesus carried me through everything I was going through. And it was such an intimate time with Jesus because he was the only one I had. And so every day I would wake up and I was like, okay, what are we doing today? How are you gonna, get me through today? And I always say that what I went through was such a blessing in my life because the way that I got to know the Lord, and it was just such a special, sacred time. And so,
Wow.
yeah, ever since then, my life really was forever changed.
I mean, I was just gonna say, like, how has your life changed? But I think it's so evident how your life has changed. I mean,
Yeah,
it's like night and day. And
yeah,
what an incredible journey. How have the people around you, family, friends, loved ones, particularly family, how have they reacted to this? Because it's a big change.
yeah. I love that question so much because so I bought my first Bible like a couple weeks after I was saved. And I remember I was so scared to have my Bible out in front of my family because I was like, they're going to think I'm like, I don't know why I thought I was so embarrassed and why the Bible was so looked down upon. But I just remember I was so nervous to tell them. And I remember I didn't really tell them. I just sort of let them find out. I remember I bought this, it's downstairs, but I bought this photo of Jesus and it was him holding this girl who was like crying, and I put it in my room. And the frame came before the actual picture. And my mom asked me what that was for. And I lied. I was like, oh, just like a random photo. And so she saw the next week that it was of Jesus. And she was oh, that's so sweet, Lola. You know Jesus or something. The thing is, though, is my family is not, I would say they don't go to church. They don't read they don't really follow the Lord. My mom, she grew up Catholic. I now go to a Christian church. And so I will say I did have a hard time with my family in the beginning. I think just feeling a little bit kind of just like I'm young. Why are you, now suddenly following Jesus? Just have fun, sort of. But
Sure.
you know what?
And that's a common mentality
Yeah,
for people.
yeah,
That's a
it
very
is.
common mentality for people. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
My dad is not a believer. My sister's not a believer. My mom is the only one who grew up Catholic, but she's also not really following Jesus. So I did feel very judged by, my family sometimes. It was never out of hate. I just think they didn't really know what they were saying.
Yeah, it's new and you've changed when you go through a change, right?
Yeah.
And it's, I can't speak for them or you, but somebody goes through a big change and then it's like, oh, what's going on here? And you're
Yeah,
trying to navigate it and understand it. And especially when it's faith, right? And it's when
totally.
it's Christianity. So that makes sense. I mean,
Yeah.
was that able to dissipate kind of for you as time has gone on?
Yes, I think because as time went on, I feel like whenever I would get judged, I would believe every word people would say. And when I started to realize and really learn more about Jesus, that's when I learned how to defend myself and knowing that no matter what, we will be persecuted here because Jesus was persecuted, but we should never be discouraged. And just that verse helped me so much because I would always let people's opinions get into my head. And I'm like, oh, I don't know why they're so judgmental. Another thing I was going to say is, you know, when you follow Jesus, we're never going to be perfect. But sometimes people can expect you to be perfect because you're reading the Bible, you're following Jesus. They
Right.
expect you to automatically just be a saint. And so whenever I would slip up and I would lose my temper sometimes, I would get a lot
Because you're a human.
because I'm
Because you're a human.
exactly, exactly. And I would get comments like, Jesus wouldn't like this, you're sinning. But the people who would say that weren't following Jesus. And so I'm just like, okay, God, I know, like, I only should be taking advice and validation from you. It doesn't matter what these people think. So, yeah, as time went on in my journey, I just really would take a moment with the Lord whenever I would get judged and hear His truth and what He says about me, and to know that I'm not the only one. So, yeah,
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean,
thank
okay,
you.
so you look at your life now, you've had this incredible change and
Yeah,
it's, you've shared it with the world, these incredible baptism pictures, getting baptized and really solidifying that public pronunciation of what it is you believe.
yeah.
When you looked at your life before, and I think about you talking about being in bed and having no hope, and I would imagine even thinking about the future was difficult when you're feeling that way. What does the future look like for you now? What do you want to do? What comes next for you after these changes?
I love that question. Thank you for asking me because that was one thing that the Lord gave me almost right away was hope for my future. And it's crazy how Jesus will give you desires in your heart that you've never had before. Um, One thing that is my biggest goal right now is working on this podcast. I have always wanted a podcast my entire life. I've always loved talking about what I'm going through. And that's something that I really felt God telling me to do in the beginning. But I always felt like obviously I needed more time. And when will I get confirmation when the time is to start? So I recently, yeah, that's one thing that I finally got confirmation from Jesus. And I was like, okay, this is happening. And I bought my camera, I got all the equipment, and then it sat in my room for 3 months because I was like feeling so discouraged. I felt like I didn't know enough to talk about Jesus. But I was like, I went to church one weekend, and the pastor was saying how we will never know everything. No matter what, we won't ever know everything. And I was like, okay, God, I'm going to start now, you know? So
I could pick that equipment up now.
yeah,
Now I could do, yeah.
exactly.
It's such a truth, though. It's such a truth.
Yeah.
You're never going to get to a point where you know everything. I mean, I just read the Bible in a year, 2 years in a row, and I learned something different both times, you
Wow.
know, that. So you just, and that was the first time. I'm 41 years old, so I'm a little older than you, that I ever did that, right?
Yeah.
Where I ever like read it all the way through. And it's like, I want to keep learning, and you will
Yeah.
too. So you're equipped now, you know, to talk
Yeah.
about these things.
Thank you so much. And like, you know, having a friend in Christ too, one of my brothers in Christ, he's really encouraged me with my podcast. He's known Jesus his whole life. And he was like, I've seen the way that Jesus has changed your life in such a short time. You have to start this now. And so I actually filmed my first episode 2 nights ago. And Andre and I edited, that's my friend in Christ, and we edited all night, and it felt so perfect. So that's a big thing. And another thing is I really feel God telling me to go to college. I didn't go to college when I graduated high school, and I felt like God put that desire on my heart because I've had such a chaotic life. I think it would be really good for me to just feel normal and enjoy my youth a little bit. So my dream right now is to go to Pepperdine, hopefully within the next year or two. So
That's amazing.
yeah, thank you so much.
That is amazing. So your podcast, you know, and people can be praying for you on that too. If you're watching, listening to this, you can be praying about college, about the podcast, but where will people be able to listen to the show, and when will they be able to listen to it or watch it?
My first episode actually comes out at 3 p.m. today. And
oh, amazing.
Yeah, so my podcast is called Heavenly Bonded. And that name, it's so crazy because I remember I was sitting with Jesus on the name, and I was like, okay, Lord, what should I name this? And I wrote down like 10 different names, and nothing felt right. And then it literally came to my mind, Heavenly Bonded, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's it. And so, yeah, it's going to be coming out on YouTube for now. Hopefully, I will actually get in I hope to get into like a real professional studio one day. I really admire the reason why I got also the desire to do this podcast after I found Jesus is I found these Christian influencers. Their names are Angela and Ariel. They have Girls Gone Bible podcast. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yep.
Yeah. So they are my biggest inspirations. I seriously would do anything to get on their podcast one day. So that's a goal of mine with this podcast, that I somehow connect with them, because I look up to their podcast so much, and that's what really.
Well, we'll have to make sure they see this and they hear that, so then they can hopefully have you on.
Yeah.
You know, I want to have you back again. I so appreciate you taking the time, sharing this journey. It is incredibly personal. And I know, you know, after spending your whole life in the public eye, being able to share something like this the way you have has been really amazing. And I just appreciate you doing that today.
Oh, thank you so much. Truly, like, it's such an honor that you wanted to have me on, because I just feel like, okay, Jesus really did bring me through that for a reason. And so thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. And I had such a good time talking with you. I would love to come back again. Made me feel so comfortable.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, this was so fun.
That's all for today's Newsmakers. I'm Billy Hollowell. Make sure you head on over and rate this show on your favorite podcast platform. Let your friends and family know to listen as well. We have new episodes Monday through Friday on your favorite podcast platforms. You can also watch the Newsmakers TV show on the CBN News channel. That show airs once a week with 3 incredible interviews with newsmakers. Be sure to head on over and watch that, and also head over for more interviews interviews to the CBN News YouTube channel and cbnnews.com. I'll see you again very soon for another Newsmakers.